Today is July 22nd, 2013, at about 3 p.m., and we're speaking with Ginger Osborn. So, if you don't mind starting with where you're born. And
I was born in central New York State, actually born in the hospital in Auburn, New York, which was about 15 miles from our home farm. Date? January 27th, 1934.
That's my birthday.
Is it really?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Good day. Except there was a blizzard. Let's see. I went to school in Elbridge, New York. Actually Elbridge was my hometown. We lived on a farm about 3 miles from town, east towards Syracuse, New York. It was Elbridge Central School at that time, and that was before there were kindergartens, so it was grade 1 through 12. Since then, it's been consolidated with the neighboring school in Jordan, and it's one big school district now. And my father was a farmer. My mother was a school teacher. She did not teach in Elbridge at that time. Eventually she did when I was in high school. She taught in Elbridge, so at noontime on my lunch hour I could go get the car keys and go downtown to eat lunch sometimes. I'm an only child. My dad was one of 5. His father was one of 9. So I have lots of relatives back there, dwindling as we get older. Let's see. After I finished high school, I started college at Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, in physiotherapy. But after a semester, or during a semester, I decided that where I really wanted to be was at Cornell, up on the hill, and to take home economics. It seems that Cornell at that time, did not take transfers in the middle of the first year. So I was going to just lay out a semester and find a job and work. But my mother had other ideas. She said, "You won't go back if you quit." Well, I don't know whether I would or not, but anyhow, somehow she and this high school principal pulled strings with the dean of the College of Home Economics at Syracuse University, and I ended up at Syracuse University, which I always said was the last place on earth I'd ever go, 15 miles from home. But that's where I went, and then come the next year when I could have transferred to Cornell, they wanted me to come down for an interview, which I thought was kind of ludicrous. I'd been down there several times.
At Cornell? At
Cornell. And I thought, those people have all talked to me, they know what's going on, and I had missed several days out of the semester going to a youth conference, and I thought, this is unnecessary. So I didn't go, and so naturally I didn't get into Cornell, but by that time I didn't care. I liked Syracuse and had a good experience.
That was my dream school.
Really?
When I was growing up.
Well, probably, had I not been so close, it might have been mine too. And I enjoy reading the alumni information now and knowing what's going on and how they rank. And I think the biggest disappointment during my college there was when the football team made it to the Orange Bowl. And were totally embarrassed. Let's see. Well, I actually, to backtrack a little bit, if I had my druthers, I would have gone to Cornell and taken ag and gone home and run the farm. But my dad said, that's no place for a woman. And so he rarely put his foot down, but when he did, you didn't argue. But as I look back on it, it's kind of funny because one of his early girlfriends was a farmer. And as I look back on it, I think, well, maybe that's why. I don't know, but anyhow, I didn't get to do that. I finally had decided that what I really wanted to do was go into the Extension Service and work with 4-H groups and 4-H program, which I still think is one of the best youth programs going. It's gone through a lot of changes, but anyhow, so I graduated from Syracuse University in home economics with some kind of a weird major called euthenics, I think, which I didn't really understand then, and I still don't. But what it amounted to was basically a liberal arts thing, because I knew what 4-H and the Extension Service involved and the kinds of things that would be helpful to me. And so that was in 1955. And I went immediately, within 2 or 3 weeks, I left for France for 4 months, living with farm families. Through the Extension Service or the 4-H program, it was then called International Farm Youth Exchange. The initials are still the same, but I'm trying to think what it's not International Farm Youth Exchange. It's something different now, but the same initials. Anyhow, we lived with farm families, and as I said, I was in France for 4 months. I lived with 4, maybe 5 families. On our evaluations, when we turned in our evaluations of the program, we felt that, yes, that was good, but we didn't get a very good overall picture of the culture and of the people in France, because we were with the rural people. And there was, even at that time, a big difference between rural and city and the way they lived. It was a great experience, and I learned a lot, and came home thinking, okay, if and when I ever get married, my kids are going to learn to speak French right away so that they're bilingual. Well, guess what? That didn't happen, but anyhow, I'm sure if I was to go back now, that would be a vast difference in France. I mean, just looking at Craig, Colorado, and the changes I've seen here in 50 years. Anyhow, so I came to Craig in mid-September of 1959 and went to work at the Extension Service. I had worked 2 years in the Extension Service in New York State, in Ontario County, and at that time New York was one of the few counties that had separate 4-H agents and separate men and women for the adult programs. So I was the assistant county 4-H agent in Ontario County for 2 years. Ontario County, the town was Canandaigua, a good Indian name. So then I think what happened was that I really needed to take a vacation, but I quit work instead, intending to come out here to go to work in Extension out here. I ended up teaching home economics, 7th, 8th, and 8th grade home economics in East Irondequoit, which is just outside of Rochester, New York, for a semester. And then I finally did get out here, and I had been out here for summer school at CSU in Fort Collins, and decided I was going into the state office and apply for a job out here. And so I walked into the lady state extension agent and said I wanted a rural county in the mountains. And she about fell off her chair because there were a lot of girls that wanted to do that, especially coming from the east. So anyway, I came out here. I started work the middle of September of '59, and eventually, well, actually pretty quickly, I learned to keep one sloppy pair of shoes in the car to tramp around in the adobe mud, and carry a pair in my hand when I had to go somewhere to look decent. And then it got to be winter time, and everybody said, "Well, what do you think of our winters and the snow and the roads?" And I said, "Well, I haven't seen anything yet that compares with what I grew up in and learned to drive in." And but there was some cultural shock, and some things that were really pretty different. And one of the first things I had to do, well, when I first started work, there was a home demonstration club in Browns Park, and that community encompasses about a radius of 70 miles. And so the county agent, whose name was Jim Gregory at the time, was, I should say, there was a county agent, Jim Gregory, and there was Dick Martin was the 4-H agent. I was, at that time, called the county home demonstration agent, was the title. It's changed many times since then. I think currently if there is a woman agent in the county, it's called the consumer education person or something of that nature. Anyhow, Jim Gregory delighted in telling me about going down into Browns Park in that area in the western end of the county, and they'd been testing for brucellosis, trying to get the cattle all cleared as brucellosis free. He just thought it was great fun to tell me about the men. Most of them were packing guns, and if you couldn't see a gun, that probably meant they were wearing a shoulder holster. So, okay, but of course I had to make sure my mother knew all this, and that I had to drive 50 to 80 miles to wherever I was going down there. And but there were never any missteps. It was just interesting, and I liked it, and I enjoy the life. And so then about a year later, I ended up marrying a native. My husband was born here in Craig, and so here I am still.
Well, you mentioned that it was a little bit of culture shock here, and that there were things were different. What did you mean by that? What was different here?
Well, of course, although I was raised on a farm, it was totally different from the ranches here. The size, the climate, and I still to this day, it blows my mind to be out driving around this weekend, for instance, and see the acres and acres and acres of hay laid down, waiting to be baled. I lived with rain back there, and we couldn't get in the field before 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning because of the dew, and then you couldn't work. I have a nephew and his family who, it's nothing for them to bale all night. We couldn't do that back there because of, again, the dew. There's so much moisture and humidity that you just don't do that. And I have seen times back there when you'd think, well, we have smoke from the fires, forest fires, and all the fires in the summertime. We'd have smoke like that from people burning hay that had been wet so many times that it was not usable. They just the farmers had to burn it. So it's still just, I look at all the hay and I think, oh my gosh, how do they dare do that? Well, I know how they dare do it now, but, and then, well, people's outlook on like is, they're very independent thinking out here. Of course, Yankees are too. So, but some things were different, and just, well, it's just a few things like that, which actually are not very different when you think about it, but it's just where you've not lived with that kind of thing. And people are more formal back there, and dress more, well, used to dress more formally. And probably are more affected in their thinking by what they think somebody else is going to think than people out here are, which is not bad, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing was that I was raised, my maternal grandmother was a Southerner, which I'm sure affected my upbringing and training in a lot of ways. But as far as, and my trip, the fact that I had been to France made me more aware of cultural shock, where otherwise I might not have been aware of it, probably. But I would never go back there to live now because of the climate, for one thing.
Right.
And it's just, I'm happy here. I like it. And I don't like winters very much, and the older I get, the less I like them. But other than that, and I have lots of good friends. And I love my work here at the museum, except when I can't make the computer work.
You mentioned winters, for one thing, and firsthand I've experienced the winter in New York. I know all the snow and the cold. Is it that much colder here?
Temperature-wise, it's colder, but you don't notice it as much because it's dry cold.
Gotcha.
And it's where it's the humidity back there.
Yeah, always humidity.
It's just,
I remember summers in Syracuse.
You wouldn't walk to the mailbox without bundling up back there, where out here you can get to the mailbox or the trash can or whatever. It's just different. And summertime, I can remember hanging wash on the line back there, and it might be there for 2 or 3 days before it finally got dry, if it didn't get rained on in the meantime. But it just, I've had no problem adjusting and enjoying it, and I love the country. Well, I don't like the arid west end of the county too much and that kind of, but I love the mountains. And I go back home now, and home. This is home, but that's home too. And, I think, oh my gosh, it's overgrown. There's so much vegetation back there. And our kids, our children were all, well, our oldest son was born in Rock Springs. Right after, well, in fact, Chuck had been transferred up there. He worked for Texaco at the time. And he had been transferred to Rock Springs before we were married. And so I quit my job, and we got married, and we lived up there for 2 years. And our oldest son, Jeff, was born in Rock Springs. So he's a native of Wyoming. The other 3 kids are natives of Craig. They were all born right here, too. Although the two youngest, the twins, were born here in Craig, but we lived at Wilson Creek, which was the Texaco camp.
Oh, right, when they were...
south toward Meeker and...
Yeah.
And...
It was like a community camp out there?
Yeah, there were originally, there were two different camps, sections of houses.
Oh, okay.
And then one of them, by the time, when he first went out there to work, just before we were married, or before he was transferred to Rock Springs, he lived in the third camp, and then there was the other camp was the upper camp and the lower camp. There were 5 houses in the upper camp, and that was where we lived when we lived out there. And there were, I've forgotten, I think 8 or 10 houses in the lower camp.
Okay.
And we lived out there almost 4 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that long-term out there.
Yeah. And of course now there is no, let's see, all the houses are, well, maybe those 5 in the upper camp are still there. But basically the houses have been...
After Texaco left?
Yeah, well, Texaco still runs the field. They're still out there.
Okay.
But it's pretty different, and there's nobody living. Even at that time, a lot of the guys lived in Meeker and drove up there. And then there were some of us, and it kept, more and more people kept moving out and moving away, but into Meeker. But that's been, let's see, a lot of years ago since we lived out there. Tim and Tina are now 46, and they were born when we lived out there, so it's been a long time. I don't know what else you want to listen to.
Well, how long did you work for the Extension Service?
All told, I worked 2 years in New York, a little over 2 years, and then I worked a year out here. Actually, my longest employment has been with the school district as a library aide.
Okay.
In the middle schools. And in fact, all of my experience in schools has been 7th and 8th grade, which explains a lot of things, maybe.
That's a brave group. I teach high school.
Do you?
Yeah, just elementary school teacher. So.
Yeah. Well, my mother was a teacher. She taught for 32 and a half years. She was an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
But and that was back where you didn't have to have a degree. I mean, she had a normal school certificate, and she only had 2 years. She couldn't, I think her dad had died, and I think she felt like she had to get out earning money to help support the family.
Yeah.
So, but actually, most of my work experience, has been in the school district. And I did teach for 1 semester back in New York, but here it was in the library. Okay. In the middle school library.
How many years did you do that for?
Well, I was just starting the 14th when I decided I didn't need that job anymore.
Okay. Okay. So 13 years.
How did you see your line of work change during that time?
Well, when I first went to work, the district had a district media library, and they had a big library of videotapes. Okay. And I was in charge of all the videotapes, and when the teachers wanted to use them anywhere in the district, they had called in an order or sent an order to me, and I had to schedule it. Plus doing all the scheduling of all the equipment for the 7th and 8th grade building. Actually, when I first went to work, it was 6, 7, and 8. Okay. And then they separated out, and then they split them again and moved, and it's fun to move a library.
Yeah, I bet.
And so, and it changed, the kind of media that we were using changed, and then, of course, with everything now, that it was a case of I moved a lot of 16 millimeter movie projectors around
Wow.
daily, and scheduled videotapes with the player and monitor on a big tall cart that had to be moved and to the second floor in some cases over here at the what's now Sandrocks. In that case, I managed to, we had 3 of those. So I had the janitor or somebody, we moved one of them up to the second floor and left it there. And then I had 2 to use on the bottom floor. And then there were slide projectors and not many film strip projectors, which in 14 years' time were pretty obsolete. There were better ways of looking at things and doing things.
Right.
And of course now let's see, how long? Before I quit, we had acquired a big dish out and could tape things. So that was kind of frustrating sometime. And the other thing was that if that dish got snow in it, it didn't work. And I'd have to go track down the janitor and say, would you please go sweep out the dish so it'll work? Oh my goodness. But and there was a lot of learning for me too, but I enjoyed it, and it was. But like I say, I've been away from it so long now, I wouldn't do well with it. I have enough trouble with computers and doing what I'm trying to do with computers here and at home. And I don't know. You better start asking questions.
No, well, how did you see, how have schools changed over the years, aside from the actual locations?
Oh. Well, of course, as I look back, when my mother started teaching, she taught it was actually a 2-room school back in New York. And, of course, here, when I first came to Craig in '59, there were still, there were still some country schools. I'm trying to think how many. Maybell, which is still there, and Dinosaur. I'm thinking there was another, maybe 1 or 2, but not many. You know, they've all been done away with. And people come in the museum here, and I talk to them about the big schoolroom downstairs and all the pictures and so on, and explain that we have 1 high school in Moffat County, and that's here well, first of all, the size of Moffat County from east to west and north to south, and the fact that we have 1 high school right here in town. Then people wonder, well, what did these people that live way out do? I said, well, they either had a place in town, and that still holds true. They have places in town that they own, or they boarded the kids out during the school year here in town. And then, of course, there's the school bus. These school buses travel incredible distances. And that was true at home, too. I lived 3 miles from the school. I got on a school bus at 7:30 in the morning because we went about somewhere between 30 to 40 miles to get to school. And there were some of the kids who lived on the other direction went even earlier than I did because those buses were running double routes, so they had to take a load to school and drop them, and then they'd go out and pick up another load from somewhere. So riding the school bus is fun, but it's long, and it's really long for kids here.
I don't think it was quite as long, but when I was young, in 29 Palms where we grew up, it spread out really far, just like Craig. And we lived so far out on this dirt road, the school bus ride took about an hour and a half each day when I was in high school. So I kind of know how that is.
Well, the curriculum has changed vastly, no matter where you are.
Yep.
And I never liked history very much until I started traveling. I always thought, it was, and I especially didn't like world history because I absolutely had to memorize everything but when I started traveling, that changed things a lot, and it's really it's interesting, and I enjoy it a lot now. But the other thing is that things are happening so fast, and there's so much history happening all the time that things are having to be left out or downsized. Things that we learned and spent time learning that seemed important at the time, there just isn't time to cover it all now. And with communication the way it is, people are a lot more aware of what's going on. And with all the social stuff on computers and so on, I question some of it because I'm not so sure that people are using good sense in some of the things they post, number one. And number two, you go to that stuff and you read it and you don't know what kind of information you're getting, really. I tend to be kind of skeptical, I get skeptical of a lot of it. But I guess it's good in a way. It's just what my age is showing when I get to some of it.
It's hard for us to keep up, too. I mean, technology is crazy.
I had a gal say to me Saturday, I guess it was, we were over at Verizon. We are just redoing all of it, going to completely wireless. And believe me, it's not easy. Besides the fact that my computer is 9 years old and was not set up to take wireless, we finally discovered after I couldn't get to my email. This gal said, "What did you do without cell phones?" And her mother and I kind of looked at each other and said, "Life was simple and easy." But you just have to sit down and make up your mind you're going to use it and learn how to do it. And I have a brand name problem because I learned to use a computer at the school, and when the schools were all furnished with Apples. So I struggle with Microsoft and Windows. But it's good when you can, like my son has a setup with 3 screens. He can roll from screen to screen to screen, which is good for what he does. But his wife couldn't understand the point in it until she got to the point of needing to do it too at her job. Now she understands. But education is just there are things that are so totally different, and most are good. They're improvements. I'm not sure about all of them, but and the thing that my husband and I, the things that we, when the kids were little, and this is not necessarily school, it's family life, both being raised on farms, we'd be discussing things and livestock, animals, crops, whatever, and I'd look at the kids and watch them, and I'd say to Chuck, I said, these kids have no clue what we're talking about. They don't have any idea what we're talking about, because they were not, they had been raised in a rural community, and they'd been exposed to much more than many kids had been. But still, that was a lot of it was a mystery to them.
Yeah.
So what was it like raising a family here then? Can you talk more about that experience?
I think it's a good place to raise a family. I've been happy with it, and I was happy with the school system. And I think our kids got a decent education, but partly because we saw to it that they had outside stuff too.
Like what?
And, well, for example, we went back and forth to New York, of course, to see my family, and at one point the kids said, "Why do we always go to New York?" And I said, "Well, because Grandma and Grandpa are there. As long as Grandma and Grandpa are alive, that's where we're going to go." But my mother always had a list of things in that area to see and do and so on. I think maybe because she couldn't handle 4 kids in the house. And we made an effort to always go, usually we'd go the same way so that we could go the fastest way, but coming home, we'd come a different way, and we made a point of doing different things and showing them different things, and it's funny. The kids would connect some of the stuff they study in school to things that they saw along the way. A couple of them in particular, and then we had a couple more that were slept all the time. But I have no problems with raising the kids here, and like I say, I think they got a decent education and exposure to a lot of things that I wasn't exposed to as a kid. And they're all doing well as adults, except our one daughter, the only daughter, has gotten caught in the tanking of the economy and downsizing and all that, and she's been working temporary jobs for something like 8 years. And but the rest of them are all doing well. The oldest one is an engineer. The second one is a cop. And the youngest one, who's a twin to the girl, is out here at the plant.
Okay.
And getting a ton of good experience. They're really, they've been pushing. And they're all doing well.
Right.
And getting older.
How did Craig change when the power plant came in?
Oh gosh. Well, when it was being built, of course there were a lot of new people around and everything, and I bowled with women whose husbands were working on it. Craig is a kind of a place that seems like people either love it or hate it. And most of those women just absolutely hated it.
Really?
And, and we had fun, we had a good time bowling, and we did other things together sometimes, but they couldn't wait until their time was up and they could get back to someplace that felt more like home. And my husband, when he was a 4-H leader, had an experience with a lady who, he had her son, and she hated it. She just absolutely hated it. But they were here several years, and I don't remember if they were working on the plant. I don't remember how they happened to be here, but she was here for several, and she was talking to him one time about the shopping. A lot of these people come from big cities, urban areas, and I have 2 daughter-in-laws could no more live in a place like Craig than they could fly. They were both raised in Denver area, and the women, the shopping was just, and this gal was telling Chuck that she just went to the store looking for something and couldn't find it, and she just, I don't know whether she did or said she wanted to just sit down in the aisle and cry.
Right.
And I can understand that. It's frustrating as all get out to say, oh, I'm going to go get, and then after you've been to every place you can think of to go, and you still don't get it.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. But when they left Craig, and like I say, I don't remember exactly how long they were here. She saw Chuck somewhere, and she didn't want to leave.
Right.
And I think if people will not spend so much time thinking about what they don't like and why they don't want to be here and they'd rather be somewhere else and doing something else, there's more than enough stuff to do that you can get involved in and interested in. And every so often I'll hear somebody say, there's nothing to do in Craig. And I think, good Lord, I can meet myself coming and going. And a lot of other people do too. It's just a mental outlook, a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I do miss, sometimes I wish I was on the eastern slope for the concerts, plays, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I've spent an awful lot of money, I think. And that's another reason that we support, like, the community concerts.
Mm-hmm.
We've supported that for years. I've served on the board for a number of years, and just because we think it needs to be here, and we want it to keep coming.
Right.
And we do have some unusual plays and dramatic things happen every so often that you don't expect to find in this kind of a place. And
so you wish there was more exposure to arts for people?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And but we have an artist community in Craig, a lot of artists in Craig who are good, and I enjoy looking at their current things and comparing to what they had done. And yeah, it's just, I mean, they're improving too, have improved over the years.
Right.
And and of course the thing that always comes up is the community when there's a crisis of some kind. The community pulls together.
Can you think of any examples of that?
Well, whenever there's a fire or a sickness, or right off the top of my head at the moment, but it happens over and over again.
Right.
And yet, also, people are very private. I knew of one fire that, they lost everything, and I kept waiting for there to be something in the paper so that I could donate something somewhere, somehow.
Right.
Well, come to find out, one of our nieces was close to the family and more involved with them, and they were, through their church, I guess, or groups that they were involved with, they didn't want it publicized because they didn't want it to look like they were looking for handouts and so on, and they were trying to take stock of what it was they really needed so that, they didn't have a bunch of stuff that they really didn't need and couldn't use.
Right.
But, people, if people get wind of anything and know about it, they take ownership of it.
Right.
And some of it is through churches, and some of it is through groups, other groups that they're active with. I had never heard of many of the churches that there are in Craig when I first came out.
There are a lot of churches here.
There are a lot of churches and a lot of bars. But I don't have a problem with it, temporarily one or two, but some of the things that come out in the paper and the letters for the editors, or things that come up, and I think, oh, here we go again. But for the most part, I can adjust and get along, and I either say what I think or I bite my tongue.
Right.
And,
I guess to close out the interview, what do you think about Craig today and how it's changed over the years and whatnot?
when I first came to Craig, I think they had just the year before, I don't know whether it was the year before or that summer, had paved the alleys downtown. There were also still telephone operators. When you went to the telephone, you had to get a hold of an operator to make your call. What else? Oh, one of my early faux pas with my job, and I don't remember all the details, but I got crossways with Mr. Crosswaite, who ran the local dairy salon. And I don't remember what it was about or how it came about, but I was used to, back home, there was no such thing as, well, yeah, pasteurized milk, but you didn't have to scoop the cream off the top and so on. I mean, everything was homogenized, and I can't remember how this happened, but boy, oh boy, I got my tail in the crack there. And because whatever I did made a big difference, and I guess, I don't know whether it was before or after, but when we were home after our second baby was born, he had never been one to spit up. And we got home, and he was spitting up all the time, and I thought, what is going on here? And one morning, my mother was scooping the cream off the milk or something, and I said, oh. So I said to the milkman, who came, I think, 3 times a week, anyhow, I said, do you have homogenized milk? Because my folks were not. You could get it either way.
Right.
And he said, yeah, I don't have any on the truck. I said, when you come the next time, bring homogenized milk, because it finally hit me that that's what was going on, that the milk was different. And I don't know whether I made that in some kind of a leaders training meeting or some kind of a comment, and I don't think homogenized milk was even available out here. I just don't remember all the details. The other thing, early on, I had a call at the office from somebody out in the oil field, working with the oil. I wanted to know what the melting point of paraffin was. And I thought, do you know how to use an encyclopedia or a dictionary?
Yeah.
But I didn't say it.
Yeah.
And I said, not off the top of my head. It's low. I know that. I still have to look it up and get back to you. And I couldn't tell you to this day what it was, but it is pretty low. But the problem was this oil that they were pumping was solidifying in the pipe.
Oh, wow.
So they needed to heat it, and they didn't know what heat to heat it to get it to come up. And that was pretty interesting, and I thought, I don't think that's what I'm here for. Exactly. Anyhow, there have just been so many changes, and it's been, it's just life. That's the way history goes. That's the way the world goes around.
Right.
Things change.
Right.
And sometimes we have to work with it a long time before we decide, okay, maybe this is for the best. But people's thinking has changed. Things that they're willing to do and that they're interested in, and places, well, one thing that's changed, I don't know that's so much here, but destination weddings. And I have a granddaughter that's going to come up here getting married before very long, and I keep thinking, I hope she doesn't decide to have a destination wedding. You know, just things that change. Clothing styles, hairstyles, thinking styles.
Right.
So you just have to, and as we get older, it's harder for some of us to adjust. But I think this is a good place to do it.
Any closing thoughts or stories?
No, I can't think of any.
Thank you.
That's great.